Joining us on the line right now, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, U.S. Army retired, a Fox News military analyst. Lieutenant Colonel Peters, thank you for joining us this morning.
I'm glad to do so.
Listen, bear with me because I want to read from this article. It was I found it on the Fox News website, and it quotes CIA Director John Brennan. And listen to this. Some of the things he's saying about ISIS are very concerning. Left unchecked, the group would pose a serious danger not only to Syria and Iraq, but to the wider region and beyond, including the threat of attacks in the homelands of the United States and our partners. He went on to say that they have new technology to coordinate operations, attract new recruits. He goes on to say this will be a long-term struggle. If there is one thing we have learned over the years, it is that success against terrorism requires patience and determination. He is saying that ISIS is snowballing. It's recently aligned itself with Boko Haram. And I just have to ask you, do you see the United States military and the United States government taking the actions it should take to meet the threat described here by the CIA director?
Not in the short term, because President Obama simply isn't going to do what's necessary. But John Brennan is certainly right. The appeal of Islamic State, of the Caliphate, and auxiliary and associated organizations is just enormous. And we have a number of disconnects. And one of the fundamental disconnects is that for instance, we here in the Washington area, we live so well, in such safety. We have a highly educated population, affluent. And most of your listeners cannot imagine why anyone would want to join Islamic State. It just doesn't. We can't get there mentally. And yet, Islamic State has created a brand that's approaching the ubiquity of Coca-Cola or McDonald's. And for those, whether in Damascus or Denver, young Muslims and wannabes, jailbird converts, those who are socially dysfunctional, and especially it's not socioeconomics, it's an emotional issue, really. For those who are socially dysfunctional, the Islamic State brand makes you an incredible offer. The offer is you can get God's approval for killing, torturing, kidnapping, raping, and if you happen to die, you go to paradise. Now, to most of us, that sounds like that's crazy. But it's not crazy if you're at the bottom of the food chain. And by the way, the other thing, Washingtonians, that we all fail to understand is the visceral, transformative power of religion, the power of revelation, real or imaginary. And so we're just not, despite our fine educations, we are not mentally equipped to come to grips with the determination of Islamic State. And if you want an indicator of how powerful the appeal is and how committed our enemies are, and ultimately this is about commitment, consider this. The tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars we spent building the Iraqi military, or for that matter, the Afghanistan military. And the Iraqi military just collapsed. And yet you have this organization, Islamic State, that's certainly not funded at the level of U.S. largesse. And yet that organization has managed to establish a very real caliphate in the ground in the Middle East, continues to make progress in some areas, fighting bitterly in other areas. And the distinguishing quality between it and all the so-called legal militaries of the area is that Islamic State's fighters are willing, even eager, to die for their cause. And that sort of commitment, that level of resolve, gives you tremendous strength. So we are going to be facing this problem for years to come. We will be forced to act when it's already very, very late in the game. And meanwhile, we're seeing not only Islamic State, but we're seeing the Iranians, whose core is a Persian population, rebuilding a new Persian empire. And all of these factors in the Middle East, all of these players, are hostile to the United States, to our interests, and frankly, to civilization.
Well, given that, Colonel, and thank you for that. I mean, that's a really great explanation as to why they keep growing and why our efforts aren't really quelling their amazing growth in that area. You said that we're going to have to act at some point. Obviously, the judicious thing would be to act sooner rather than later. So do we have the political will for that? Is there anyone leading that charge and making the case for it? Because we're not going to commit American troops to fight this very real enemy when we need to fight them unless we've got a leader who can convince the American people that this is worth doing.
Well, I think there's another very disconnect, because Washington really is a bubble. I mean, just this morning reading the Washington Post, what am I reading about? How many Teslas there are in Washington. Where I come from, in the coal fields of Pennsylvania, people don't drive a lot of Teslas. And so when I hear people say, well, the American people don't have the will to fight and take on Islamic State, I mean, where I come from, people do. The problem is our governing elite doesn't have it.
I guess I'm informed by the fact that President Obama was elected in 2008 and reelected in 2012, in large part, according to the exit polls, because he went after the Iraqi War, said that it was misguided, said that he would pull us out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and the people seem to like that.
Well, yeah, in 2008 was light years ago. Islamic State didn't exist. When he came to office, Al-Qaeda was truly on the ropes. But times change, and that's another thing. Flip-flopping is a pejorative way of attacking politicians. But when the facts on the ground change, you've got to change. Your views have to evolve. And so, again, I see a very big disconnect between politicians who are still stuck in this, anti-war Bush years mentality, and the American people who have enormous common sense, who realize that when you face an organization like Islamic State, that you have to act. And as you observed, the longer you wait, the higher the butcher's bill is going to be. I know this can be characterized as, Peters just wants war.
Yeah, warmonger there.
Yeah, but hold on a minute. You talk about how there was a time and a place when radical Islam was on the ropes.
Yes.
And what was that time when we had the surge going on, when we were out there actively fighting it? And now that we've pulled back, as soon as that vacuum made itself present and made itself known, radical Islam runs right in to fill the vacuum. And we're not doing anything at this moment to fight it. I'm very concerned about this because, nobody wants to preach for war, but it seems like there's a battle coming one way or the other, and it makes a lot more sense to take it on early than to take it on late.
Yeah, well, nature may abhor a vacuum, but terrorists love one.
No, they love it.
And indeed, the best metaphor, and all metaphors are fraught with risk, but the best metaphor I can think of is always cancer. Cancer tumors don't go away on their own. They get worse. And we had operated against the cancer with some real success in the latter years of the Bush administration, for all that administration's undeniable failures and mistakes. But President Obama came to office with a surreal, idealistic faculty lounge vision of the world and how it was going to work. And he took his eye off the ball, to use another cliche. He didn't act. He didn't act decisively. He didn't see the threat, and there are a variety of reasons for that. But at any rate, he allowed the threat to metastasize, and we now have gone from in 2008, when radical Islam, fanatical Islam, was on the ropes, to the point where it stretches now from Pakistan and northwest India, across the Middle East and North Africa, down to Nigeria. We have incidents in Ottawa. We have incidents in Sydney, Australia. So this is a phenomenon that we need a comprehensive approach to it.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, what we're doing is, to use another military cliche, we're just putting Band-Aids on a hemorrhage.
We got to leave it right there. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.